everyone. Welcome back again to the Sinister Spotlight podcast here on Mephisto's Castle. I am Jose, and as you'll remember from our last episode, I am here with my new co-host, Eric. Say hello, Eric, to the lovely people out there who are listening.
Hello, Eric.
All right, we're off to a good start. Well, as most of you have probably gathered from the lovely little piece of...
We're very tired.
Yes, we should probably make that known right now before we move on. We're very tired, so this should, if anything, prove to be a very surreal episode. So if either of us sound like we're having a stroke, we probably are, or we're just collapsing from overexhaustion. But at any rate, from the lovely little piece of theme music that you just heard and the icon that serves as the image for this episode, you will probably be able to gather that the topic for this particular episode is indeed the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine, and that was made popular in the 90s, a period of time that's very close to Eric and myself.
Yes.
Yes. We would both agree to that. So we're just going to be talking about the Goosebumps series a little bit here. We're probably not going to get too much into the offshoots of the series like Goosebumps 2000 and Give Yourself Goosebumps, but who knows? We could. But we're probably going to stick to just the original series that was put out starting in 1992, and then just talk about some of our personal experiences with the series, and a little territory into the TV show that later came out in the 90s, and all the fun stuff that's involved in that. So, if everyone is ready, then Eric and I are more than ready to discuss Goosebumps. Are you excited?
We're in for a scare.
Yes, we're in for a scare. Listeners, beware. You're in for a scare.
I forgot the first part of that.
Yeah, they changed it. You know, for the books it was readers, for the TV show it was viewers, and in our case now it'll be listeners. So we're amping up the Goosebumps motto one notch.
It's fun to rhyme.
Exactly, it is. Personally, I like the sound of viewers. It just goes a little bit better than readers.
All right, so where do you want to begin?
Well, I guess the most perfect place to begin is probably the beginning. That's just me, though. I guess I'm weird like that. So, with that in mind...
You're no Tarantino.
I know. I guess that's just where we kind of split off genetically. But at any rate, just kind of wanted to...
He doesn't begin at the beginning, people. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, and for those who, were not savvy to Eric's clever reference... There you go.
Quentin Tarantino is an American filmmaker.
Oh, you pulled the Wikipedia up, I see. But, well, I guess I could start off by asking you, so we can hear some more of your snappy jokes. What was your first experience with the series? When did you first come into contact with it and started getting into the whole crazy world of Goosebumps?
I remember... Probably I was about 7 or 8, and my sister, who was a year older than me, was reading the series, and she had Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, which is book number 13, on the dresser. We shared a bedroom at that time, and what are you laughing about?
Nothing. It
was completely wholesome. I don't know what you're implying.
I'm not implying anything. Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. That's clearly what's being implied here.
Yes, indeed. And I remember I was always interested in horror, and my dad always had Dean Koontz and Stephen King books lying around that I would occasionally try to crack open and, read some passages out of and immediately be told, you're too young for these. So I think when I picked up Piano Lessons Can Be Murder and started to read it, I kind of hid it because I thought, I don't know, I just had that association of like, this is scary, therefore I'm not supposed to be reading it. I'll probably get in trouble for this. So I guess there was that element of danger that sort of drew me in. And from there, I just started reading the rest of the series. And I think at that time, they probably weren't more than, 25 or 26 in.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you're old.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. Got a gray hair already.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I know. I know the feeling.
But and then I basically just kept up with it until the very last book, which was number 62.
Yeah.
And I think I'd sort of outgrown it by that time, but I just kind of stuck with it out of a sense of loyalty or dedication, I guess. Because that was a long, strange road that those books took.
Oh yeah, yeah. We'll definitely be illuminating more on that aspect later. But yeah, there were definitely some bizarre outings, particularly later on in the series. But I've sympathized with many of the things that you just mentioned. Like with me, for instance, it was kind of funny because I want to say I was in third grade. So, and I remember that in our elementary school, we had the books. They were all in hardcover for some strange reason. Well, that's the nature of library books. But I always noticed them, and of course, I always noticed that the usually remarkable, at least distinguishable Tim Jacobus artwork that they had on their covers, and I was always kind of fascinated them because, like yourself, I had this kind of intrinsic fascination for horror, so I was quick to learn, oh, Goosebumps books, yeah, those are scary books, all right. But at the time, when I picked up my first Goosebumps books, I didn't like to read, which was really strange considering how much I enjoy it now, but that's kind of neither here nor there. But I picked up
we all have our gateway drugs.
Exactly. And it was funny because I was going to use that very same phrase to describe it, but of course you being I know, you being the genetic twin asshole that you are, you just had to beat me to the punch. But I believe the first one I picked up was Stay Out of the Basement, because that has a...
That's a weird one to start with.
Probably. Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, they're all kind of weird to start off with, if you ask me. It's not like I started out with How I Learned to Fly. That would have been a bizarre one.
That's true. I do want to talk about I Live in Your Basement later, though, just as an example of one of the more bizarre books in the series.
No, I do as well because I have a very vivid memory of one of the details in that book. But yeah, we'll definitely get to that later. But to continue my story, that's totally more important than yours. The first one I picked up was Stay Out of the Basement, and I read through it all, and I dug it. No planned pun intended. I dug it, but...
Oh wait, did you say Stay Out of the Basement or I Live in Your Basement?
No, Stay Out of the Basement.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Well, that tangent was completely irrelevant. I'm sorry.
Not really. We're still talking about basements, and they do practically have the same title, so yeah, I don't blame you. But
okay, that's only the second one. All right.
Yeah. So maybe I'm old too. But no, Stay Out of the Basement, and I dug it, but I didn't. I don't know. I felt like I didn't immediately get the hook right away, so it must have been that following summer. I went to the public library and I did this like Goosebumps double feature, a very odd one, where I just picked two books off the shelf and I read them like back to back. It was Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, which was number like 34, I think, and Ghost Beach, which was number 22 or something like that. And that was, yeah, that was when it like clicked for me between animated lawn furnishings and surfing phantoms. For some reason, that's when it finally clicked in my mind that, okay, this series is cool. These, this R.L. Stine guy, he's talking about things I like. The stories are fairly exciting. My third grade mind said to myself, and I just kind of went off running from there.
How much were you into horror at that point?
That was pretty much when, geez, I'm starting to wonder, was it third grade? Because I wasn't actually, I remember it was down here in Florida, but my horror kick started around second grade, getting into third grade. Third grade is when it really took off, because that was the time that I started watching like the Universal horror movies at a pretty consistent, frequent rate. But yeah, I like you, I knew that, horror was something that I was interested in, but like so many other kids my age at the time, most, I thought reading was boring. I'd much rather watch a movie or watch TV. But man, in a way, I can't help but be thankful to R.L. Stine, I guess, that I gave those books a chance and they rewarded me at the time, and I started devouring the whole series like it was nobody's business. What about you? How far along in your passion were you that you realized that this horror thing was your type of thing?
At that time, boy, I don't remember. I think I've always been interested in horror.
Yeah.
But I never really watched horror movies at that time. I think we brought this up in the comfort food episode.
Yeah, we probably did.
Orange books from that summarize like the Universal franchises and things.
Right, the Crestwoods.
The library, yeah. So I think that's probably about where I was at that time. I was interested in that type of stuff.
Right.
And cryptozoology and UFOs and all that sort of paranormal stuff. So Goosebumps was a good fit at that time because it was kind of funny, but also kind of scary, and it rode that line pretty well for someone that age.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I know if we were to pick up the books and give them a second reading, our perspectives would probably totally change and be like, "This isn't scary at all." What the hell was I thinking?
Or funny.
Yeah, or funny. That's very true. But yeah, at the time they just seemed to work, and I think that was kind of what the draw was for most people, because in the 90s Goosebumps was the shit. I mean, I'm not sure if it still stands, but I think I read at some point that like Goosebumps was the best selling, like in Guinness records, Goosebumps was the best selling series for children ever.
Right.
And yeah, if you were growing up,
it.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, if you were growing up in the 90s, the presence of it in culture, nearly give you a whiplash. Like, and of course, some cynical people might say, well, yeah, they marketed it to death, which, yeah, is probably true. But yeah, it was everywhere. They had the, what do you call it? Are they called Pogs?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the Goosebumps slammer.
Yeah, that's right. God, I remember I had a book. I probably still do have it. That was kind of like a guidebook to the Pogs, to how to use your Goosebumps Pogs, and like for each Pog, it told you a little snippet about the story that it represented. So no, I remember. I'm pretty sure we had a few of those. I don't anymore, but yeah, you had the Pogs. They used to sell like certain books, like some of the tales that give you goosebumps. They sold them in these sets that had like little night readers, like mini reading lamps attached to them. Just the shit was everywhere. The TV series that came out later. So, Christ, if you were a kid who was interested in horror and growing up in the 90s, Goosebumps was your go-to, gateway drug.
I remember there was even talk at a certain point that Tim Burton was going to be adapting a movie, a Goosebumps movie.
That would have been interesting, I think.
Yeah, probably about the time that he was doing like Edward Scissorhands and stuff.
Yeah, that would have been right around that time.
Surface. I think that actually would have been pretty decent.
No, probably would have been, honestly, because like you were saying, particularly with Tim Burton, they kind of seem to fit each other rather well, because you have the Goosebumps series, which has its darker, slightly horrific, scary moments, kind of balanced out with this, depending on your point of view, lighter sense of humor that works or doesn't work. And Tim Burton's, resume is very similar to that type of aesthetic. So yeah, it probably would have been a great fit. Maybe I'm mistaken, but. And maybe I'm confusing it with something else that they were doing. I know recently that they had this new series that came out involving Horrorland. I think the series was called Escape from Horrorland, and he just published these books like this previous year. But, Christ, for some reason, I want to say when they were considering doing a movie, it was supposed to be like a Horrorland movie or something that involved Horrorland. Maybe I'm misremembering that.
That sounds like something I heard.
Could be. I don't know. But yeah, I guess out of all the books, if they were to adapt a particular one, that one would probably work to be the most inclusive. Like Horrorland, it's this horror amusement park. You can have all these different characters from like the books show up. Like I can just imagine, like for some reason that made me think of like oh, throw a ball, win a prize, and the shelves are just lined with Slappies.
Right.
Yeah. Curse dummy for each kid. But no, that would have been very interesting. I didn't know that detail about Tim Burton.
Yeah, it's funny that I even knew who Tim Burton was at that time because I wasn't really paying attention to film. I
Yeah.
guess it speaks to how ubiquitous he was at that time also.
Or maybe just how cultured and sophisticated you were at that time.
Well,
That's a given, I guess.
sure.
But
I swirled the apple juice in my champagne glass.
oh yes, yes, like a sir.
Exactly.
But speaking of the books, obviously we touched on how we got started into it. As far as the original series is concerned, what would you say were probably some of your favorites? Like ones that either really stuck with you, or maybe ones that you might have even have gone back to reread because you enjoyed them so much.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier, and it seems to me that the ones that were most memorable to me, or that I liked the most, were the ones that were sort of atypical for the series, I guess.
Okay.
Like the first one I thought of was Deep Trouble. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, yeah, it was funny too, because, well, I'm probably spoiling your conversation about it here, but I remember being totally, whiplashed by that one because the cover art does not prepare you for what the actual story is. That's all I'll say
Right.
for it. So I'm sure you'll go into more detail about that.
Yeah, the cover is um, from the vantage point of under the water. You see like a boy's torso and legs. You don't see his head. Not that he's been dismembered or anything.
well,
He's just like he is obviously oblivious to the fact that there's a hammerhead shark circling underneath him.
yeah,
That's the cover. And I think in the actual book, that's like a 2-page cliffhanger scene.
yeah, that's probably
It may
about
even
it.
be the old dolphin disguised as a shark. Not disguised, but
Oh,
oh
right.
no, I think there's a shark fin over there. Oh no, it's just a dolphin.
It's just Flipper.
But the actual plot of the book was about how this kid and his like marine biologist dad discovered a mermaid, I think it was.
Yep.
And they captured her in a tank, and then the guys, the biologist team, wanted to sell her for money or whatever. I mean, he was like the greedy bad guy.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the book was them trying to rescue the mermaid and put her back in her natural habitat because they know that it's wrong to put her in captivity. Yada, yada, yada. But I think the reason that I liked that one, though, is because there was a sense of pathos, if I can use that word, in the context of a children's series, that I just remember feeling really bad for Mermaid. And that was something that I hadn't experienced for the Goosebumps book. So I think maybe that's why that one stuck out to me.
Yeah, that one certainly was atypical to the series, like you said. If anything, for just the inclusion of the mermaid. I mean, maybe not so much in consideration like maybe one that I'm sure you'll probably remember, but was kind of also weird. Was like Legend of the Lost Legend. That makes me think of.
Yeah, I don't really remember that one.
No, it was kind of weird because, where, and this is kind of diverging from Deep Trouble, but yeah, it was kind of almost like, I don't think there was like any particular monster or, like beastie or villain even, but it had a very mythic kind of overtone to it, and really, for the most part, I don't remember too many details about the story, but it had this very kind of, it's kids going on this treasure quest of sorts, and they run into, maybe a strange looking person here or there, and it's perpetuated. The whole story is fueled by this legend of the lost legend that, carries them on their journey. But yeah, it was very atypical, I think, in the sense that it didn't deal with kids bored living in the suburbs and then all of a sudden running into a camera that takes pictures from the future, or green gel from a toy store that devours everything. So it kind of seemed to really um, take the series in a different direction. I think I don't think there was like I don't recall there being stories similar to it in other alternative horror series for kids during the 90s that kind of took that approach. So it was kind of weird. It was like an anomaly in the series, I think.
Yeah, and if you were to scroll through a list of the books, I think it's kind of surprising how many influences R.L. Stine was able to work into the series throughout its run.
Yeah, that's for
There's
sure.
like some stories that were obviously inspired by the Universal movies with mummies and werewolves and things.
Uh-huh.
There's aliens. There's like pulp adventure stories. There's some very surreal stories. There's some very Twilight Zone-esque stories. There's ghost stories. You know, so I think he kind of just used it as a platform to sort of dump everything that he seems to like.
Yeah.
Ghostwriters would.
Well, remains to be seen. But no,
Ghostwriters.
Ooh, what do you want to happen in the next chapter? But
and then I woke up. That
yep.
Usually happens in the next chapter.
Yeah, usually there's like 2 or 3 dream sequences in some stories. But now what was I gonna say?
That wasn't very good at
that. No, but no, that I think that was one of the things that we were talking about. Well, what was the main draw for so many kids to make it such a best-selling series? For me, I liked it for that reason that you kind of just illustrated. I liked it because it introduced me to all the, granted, superficial subfields and archetypes of the horror genre. It was like I was getting my first taste of them. So, and
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and kind of a sense of how the genre works. So, oh look, we have a mummy story and we have an alien story. The alien stories, which by the way, I usually wasn't ever too hot for, but personal tastes. But yeah, like you said, you're kind of getting this. I know I use this metaphor in the horror comfort food episode, but you're getting this buffet of all these different horror archetypes and scenarios, and that was the main draw for me. I felt like I was experiencing all these different things, all these different types of stories that existed in the genre that R.L. Stine was either putting it kindly, adapting, or putting it cynically, ripping off for kids.
Yeah, about the overview of the series. Did you find, you said you weren't too hot for the alien ones, so did you find that there were any particular formulas or motifs that you did like? Books about, like like the ones about the mummies maybe, or?
It was kind of funny that you use that as the example because I didn't like the mummy books that much either. I felt like they were the same, like the two from the series. The first one, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, number 5, and I think Return of the Mummy was number 23. It's really sad that I'm able to
memorize.
I guess as a kid I just fucking stared at those things all day and night, so they're just ingrained.
Yeah, that's something you could do when you were a kid, though.
Yeah, exactly.
If you like the movie, you could just stare at the DVD cover of the movie, not even watch it. Just
pretty much. But yeah, I wasn't too hot on the mummy stories, but yeah, there were certain ones that I did enjoy quite a bit. Probably the most stereotypical one for anybody to mention in regards to the Goosebumps series is that I like. What's that?
Slappy.
Oh yeah, I like the Living Dummy books, the Slappy books. And for me, it was at the time. I don't know. I don't mean to put too much of a psychological spin to it, but I did and still do a little bit have a fairly prevalent fear of ventriloquist dummies and puppets. I just think they're creepy. So I guess at the time, and especially with Night of the Living Dummy, the first one, that cover was enough to convince me not even to bother reading the book because I was just convinced it was going to scare the crap out of me. So I guess in a sense, the reason why I ended up liking it to a certain extent was I was kind of conquering my fear, basically. Yeah, at least facing it, trying to find out, okay, what the big deal was with these living dummy books and if I could take it. And thankfully, I guess maybe R.L. Stine might have instinctively have known this, or, just the nature of ventriloquist dummies, ventriloquist acts. The dummies by nature are usually the ones making the wisecracks. So Slappy, in addition to kind of being scary, which he genuinely was, especially when he was talking about like taking over children's souls, that was pretty heavy stuff for my age. But he always had, usually there were these really cheesy one-liners, like insults that he'd throw out in every book. So that kind of lightened the blow, I think. Um, but yeah, the Living
Yeah,
Dummy books were a mainstay, I guess you could say, for me.
I think there was that scene in every one of those books where the kid signed up for a talent show
Yeah.
with Slappy, and then Slappy just started insulting the audience members.
Exactly. I think in one of them it was a birthday party. I think in like Bride of the Living Dummy, it was at a birthday party, and he ended up puking on like the birthday girl, which was pretty freaking hilarious. But yeah, there was always that scene, whether the kid was just putting on a little show for his family, his visiting aunt and uncle maybe, and yeah, he was telling the aunt, "Oh, she's so fat she needs her own zip code." Some really terrible like '90s jokes. Just like
Is that your head, or did your neck blow a bubble?
exactly. That's actually probably better than most of the ones that were told in the book.
Right.
So that's,
I think
then,
that one was in the first one. Although Slappy wasn't actually in the first one until the very end, right?
no, which totally gobsmacked me when I first read that book. The whole book was concerned with Mr. Wood.
Mr. Wood.
Yeah, the most clever name for a ventriloquist dummy you'll ever see. Mr. Wood. And it blew my mind because not only was it's Slappy, the guy everybody's talking about in the Goosebumps books, he was on the cover. Slappy was on the cover. This is the dummy that was, described as being Slappy, and that's the one on the cover. But for all of Night of the Living Dummy, number 7, um, it was
Yes.
talking about this guy, Mr. Wood, who was terrorizing the two sisters who adopted him, and it was only at the very end the twist ending was Slappy is alive as well. So I know who saw that coming, and it's kind of funny because I think for the TV series, rightfully so, they switched it around so that Slappy was the main terrorizer for the episode, and then Mr. Wood came to life at the end of the story. I guess in a sense it made sense for Slappy to come to life at the end of the first book because that would naturally mean he would return for the sequels, but still,
Right.
this was the terrifying dummy that was depicted on the cover, and then I found out this asshole named Mr. Wood was the one who was taking up my time was definitely a jolt for me.
Yeah. How presumptuous of him.
I know, right? Jesus Christ, who does he think he is? But yeah, in addition to that, probably I'll just mention technically 3 other books that I really liked. Very briefly, Scarecrow Walks at Midnight was probably one of my favorite ones, and I remember I had a friend of mine. This was before I could even read. We had one of the Goosebumps books, and the checklist that was always in the back of them, the catalog for you to order your next Goosebumps book or back issues. I don't know what they call them in book back books. For you to order your Goosebumps books. And he read me the list one day, and I was just entertained by that, just sitting there thinking what the stories could be like. And I remember the one that always stuck out in my mind was The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, because that was just an evocative as all hell title, and it just fascinated me. So yeah, when it got time to actually reading the book, I thought it was really cool, and I just loved the image of, those lumbering, you know, figurines of hay just, stalking around the farmhouse. That was just such a cool image. And, that was...
Cover too.
What's that?
Great cover on that one.
No, yeah, that's a really good one. The moonlit cornfield and the evil-eyed scarecrow on its stalk there. But that was a great one. I have I have a fairly big infatuation with the Phantom of the Opera, so obviously the Phantom of the yeah, Phantom of the Auditorium. Let me see, number 24.
You are correct.
Damn. Uh, Phantom of the Auditorium was a big deal for me, and I just loved the whole story um, of it. You know, ooh, these kids are putting on a cursed play in their school auditorium, and you know, I don't know, I was always fascinated by the Phantom of the Opera, and from I think we discussed it in the horror comfort food episode. Phantom of the Opera was my first delving into the horror genre officially, so I guess I just always have carried it with me like that. So that book was a lot of fun. I just love how you know, R.L. Stine kind of twisted the different aspects of the original story. Like he kept the underground lair of the Phantom. Turns out it was like some weird hobo living underneath the stage. That wasn't the actual Phantom, but at one point they went down beneath the stage and they found this random homeless guy, like sitting down there eating cornflakes. I think that was kind of weird. But and
cornflakes bathed in vodka.
Yes, and the Goosebumps series took a very dark turn all of a sudden. But and I will say, just to wrap up, what my favorite books were. I always loved the Halloween books, namely, of course, the Haunted Mask books, and I dug Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns pretty much. But the Haunted Mask books I liked a lot, just because that archetype of, again, the cursed, you know, Halloween mask that turned the person who wore it into a monster. I kind of experienced a similar thing with actually Bruce Coville's novel, The Monster's Ring. I don't know, I just dig stories like that because the main character in that, he would put on the ring and he'd turn into a monster. And I think for his school's Halloween party, he, you know, turned into the monster, and eventually he was getting to the point where he couldn't turn back. So, you know, I dig stories like that, and of course I dig it when they happen at Halloween because I'm just a geek for the holiday.
Sure. Why else would you be doing this podcast?
Exactly. Did you dig any of those titles yourself, like the Haunted Mask books or anything?
You know, I find that I really don't remember them. The Haunted Mask, I remember a big moment for her turning into a horrible person is when she throws an apple at a house. And her friend is like, Carly, no!
She's on the road to sin and degradation.
Yeah, someone has the audacity to give them an apple instead of candy.
Well, clearly they deserve it. The Rotters. That's too funny. That reminds me of that moment from the Ghost of Fear Street book that you told me about with the ooze.
The ooze that turns people...
Yeah, the one that turns them stupid. It's making me stupider.
Becoming stupid.
Well, yeah, the ooze is having... Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, the ooze is having an effect on this book, that's for sure.
Yeah, he did come up with some pretty crazy ideas for cliffhangers.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You gotta have, like, you know, 31 cliffhangers per book. Some of them are going to be a little out there.
Yeah, you definitely have to reach for them. Like, I remember, yeah, I can't, at the moment, I can't think of any ones in particular, but there were ones that, even at the time when I was reading them at a young age, the character would be terrified of some type of weird, oh god, the Barking Ghost, for instance. This is a classic. First chapter of the book, the kid wakes up from a dream, I think, of course, and it's at night, middle of the night, and for whatever reason, I guess maybe because of a noise that he hears outside, he goes out onto his lawn, and, you know, he's looking around, and then all of a sudden, he looks over and he sees a snake crawling right towards him, and oh my god, it's the end of the chapter. Start of the next chapter, it's a garden hose.
Yeah, typical Stine.
Oh god, he gets me every time. The garden hose as a snake, never fails to fool me.
There was also one in You Can't Scare Me, I remember, where the character thought he was being chased home, And then it was like, oh no, it was nothing. I was just paranoid.
Oh, oh, that's like a relief. It's like, oh, I was being chased by something. Oh no, never mind. Turns out it's just my paranoid complexion. Move along, kids.
Right. That might be a bigger problem in the long run.
Yeah, then
what are these cold, slimy hands grasping my neck? Oh, it's just my sibling who was holding a Coke.
Right.
That happened 3 or 4 times in the book.
Yeah, exactly. Or, if like I could imagine that happening in Deep Trouble where the main character freaks out and turns out it's just seaweed around his neck.
Right.
But like you say, when you have like a good 30 cliffhangers in your book, you have to start reaching at a certain point. So I guess we can't fault him to a certain degree.
Let me talk about my other favorites real quick.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
The other two that I thought of were How I Got My Shrunken Head, which I love because it was like an adventure story.
Yeah.
I don't think there had really been just a straight up kind of actioner throughout the series, that one was basically just about a kid who had this magical shrunken head that he inherited from his weird aunt, and then they went on an expedition to the jungle, and he got into all kinds of scrapes, and he discovered he had this magical chant that he used during video games or something, but it turned out to be a real life incantation or whatever. I really don't remember it at all, but I liked it because it was like straight up pulp.
Yeah.
Kind of like I think probably like an Edgar Rice Burroughs pastiche or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it was almost kind of a Indiana Jones light for kids in a sense.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, that one was fun. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you have something to say about it?
No. I was just gonna say that one was fun because I don't remember too much about it either.
Yeah, I find that I don't remember much about most of these books actually.
Whatever the hell they were about, I don't know. We're talking about them for some reason.
It's mostly just the covers, because the title and the cover combination were very evocative at that time.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the aforementioned I Live in Your Basement.
Yes.
Second to last book in the series, and so trippy.
So trippy.
I did not know what to make of it. And I think that's what I liked about it, because it's definitely the weirdest book out of a series of weird books. And it was about a kid who got hit in the head with a baseball bat on accident.
Yeah.
Then he kept waking up in different realities, and like the people around him kept changing. And then he was like, I'm in the doctor's office, and now the doctor is this big hulking like gorilla guy.
Yeah.
Now I'm this other guy. And then at the end, he finally wakes up for real, and somebody keeps calling him and saying, I live in your basement. And then when he wakes up at the end, he realizes that he's just been that person. He is the person who lives in the basement, and everything else was just like a fever dream or something.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
You actually reawakened many details about that book for me just now.
More levels than Inception.
Right? I was just going to say, hey kids, you like naked lunch? Well, here's something for you.
Right.
Well, that is crazy. No, what I mentioned before was you touched on it, the segment where he's in the doctor's office. I'll never forget it. Reading that book.
Was it Dr. Merkin, I think?
Oh, God, I'm surprised.
I think his name was Dr. Merkin, which I didn't know at the time was like a kind of a weird pun to have in his kid's book.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't know what pun it's referencing, to be honest with you.
Oh, a merkin is like a wig for your pubic area.
Oh, okay.
The female.
That's lovely. See,
Yeah.
The Goosebumps is a learning experience for all, including me, 10 years later.
Exactly.
But, no, the segment in the doctor's office with Dr. Merkin, I guess. Yeah, I'll never forget it. I remember him being this huge, gigantic brute of a man, and his idea of an inspection, I suppose, is, he asks the kid to say ah, the kid opens his mouth, and this guy takes his giant gorilla paw, and he reaches down into the kid's throat, and he begins pulling his tongue out. And it keeps coming out like the joke rags and, that you see the clowns use. And his tongue is piling up on the floor next to him. And I remember reading that, and I don't think I literally did it, but I felt like I was holding my hands against my head and asking, what the hell am I reading? What is this? Is this Goosebumps?
Yeah.
It was totally surreal. Like, for me at the time, the closest thing I could think of in conjunction with it is like, this is some straight up Freddy Krueger shit right here.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know what to make of it. It was just,
I don't know if it was a good book, but it was certainly interesting.
yeah, he made us remember it. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I Live in Your Basement is definitely an intriguing book, and certainly would have been interesting to have seen that one adapted for the TV series.
Oh man, they wouldn't have had the budget.
They wouldn't have gotten it past the censors, I think. Been like,
Yeah,
okay, we
too.
can't show this just out of a public health concern. We think people will go insane if grade school age children witness this. But speaking of the TV series, I have fairly vivid memories of watching it when it was in its heyday, so to speak. That was like the late 90s. I want to say like it started in, I don't know, 96 or 97. It went to 98, I'm pretty sure of that. But I remember watching quite a few episodes and getting introduced to some of the stories through there. Like I remember, I think I saw the How I Got My Shrunken Head episode before I actually read the book, which
I
was
didn't even know they did that one as an episode.
yeah, they did. It was a two-parter actually, I think. And from what I remember, it was pretty faithful to the book itself. But yeah, in regards to the TV series, do you have any like vivid memories or images that come up from your subconscious?
I remember that opening.
Oh yeah.
Basically, because it had some. It was basically just a guy who I guess was supposed to be R.L. Stine.
Yeah.
Like in a trench coat and a dark hat, walking with a briefcase.
Yeah, basically looked like a giallo killer.
Yeah, because briefcase opens and then papers fly everywhere, along with the Goosebumps G.
Yeah.
Like in shadow form, and that just kind of roams through this suburban neighborhood and infects things with evil.
Yeah, which by the way, for me, as silly as it sounds, but I was always terrified of that fucking golden retriever that it hovered over.
He passes by and the eyes turn green or something.
Yellow, yeah.
So, yeah.
For some reason,
and then the music. Yeah. Then the dog starts barking the music.
That's right.
Bark, 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 bark.
Starts barking along to the melody, which kind of disrupts any sense of tension or suspense that the theme might have brought up. But no, I as silly and random as the the dog bark was, I think the theme was overall pretty effective. Like especially, I always liked it when uh, it was probably later in the series, obviously, that when the G went up to the door of the house, it opened and you saw like the little brief snippets from all the episodes. So you'd see the mummy kind of going towards the camera here, or you see the shadowy house, you see Slappy pop up. So that shit, got you amped up for the show, whether it was in a terrified sense or an excited sense or both. I think it definitely worked in that sense.
Yeah, it was a pretty well done opening.
Yeah, for a kids show.
Yeah, I don't actually have too many memories of the show itself. I think I was kind of too much of a snob. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
This is just a bastardized version of I'm an intellectual. I read.
Yeah, I read the Goosebumps books. You were a hipster before there were hipsters. Oh, you watch the TV show? I read the books.
Yeah. So I can't say I remember too many episodes all that vividly.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I just have like brief memories myself. I've actually seen some of them in recent years. I don't know, maybe
they show them on like Cartoon Network every October, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I remember it was maybe like 3 years ago. They and I loved what they did with it. I turned into a kid all over again. I think it was about 3 years ago for Halloween. It was like the first time that they were showing it on cable again, and in a consistent rate. So yeah, it was like for all of October, Cartoon Network sponsored. We're going to be showing Goosebumps episodes, and the way they went about it, I'm not sure if you saw it, but the promos, like the commercials that they did for it, were in the style of like a Grindhouse trailer, kind of like the Fox trailers that they did for the Grindhouse. Like the voice they used was like the one from Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, where it was like the really deep bass, and they show grainy footage of the actual episodes. Oh God, it was awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was like a horror, a little horror kid all over again, and it was wonderful. I guess because of that, and just kind of out of a nostalgic longing for those, I've watched some episodes recently, which are pretty funny. But no less funnier than watching an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, which is something that I'm sure we'll touch on in a future episode for sure.
Yeah, I have a lot more experience with that one.
Oh yeah. But no, there were just like some things, like one particular scene I remember from an episode that I haven't seen recently was from the episode called "Don't Wake Mummy," which hilarious title.
Oh boy.
I want to say it's actually based on one of the short stories from one of the Tales That Give You Goosebumps books, but I don't remember. But basically, kid has like these historian parents, or one of them is at least archaeologists, whatever, and the sarcophagus is actually shipped to their house, and just chills in their basement. Like it ain't no big thing. It's not like it's a historical relic or anything. It's just put in the basement of some suburban house.
Sure.
Yeah, why not, right? But yeah, the sarcophagus is just chilling down there, and of course the mummy's alive and it awakens. But the one part I'll never forget is right at the end. You see the mummy lumbering after the kids, and I was pretty scared. Honestly, watching it at the time, this mummy looked like it was seriously gonna fuck somebody's shit up. Its heart came separate, heart sold separately. From the actual corpse. So like it was in, I don't know, maybe a little box or something, and somehow the kids got it in their heads that they had to destroy the heart. So as one of them is kind of like mid strangle, the other one manages to take this dusty, dried, withered heart out of the box, and of course, using the innovation that all mid 90s kids have, puts it in the blender. And pushes the button, and it just grinds the heart up, and all of a sudden you see the mummy convulse. And I don't know, for some reason, as harmless as it kind of seems, it was like pretty heavy for me at the time to see, I don't know, an organ get grinded up in a blender, honestly. So it was pretty gnarly at the time. I thought it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, when you say it out loud, it does kind of seem more intense than you would want your children to be watching.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess because it was, of course, a dusty old thing, it was bloodless, so wasn't any real goopy gore to go along with it. But still, pretty gnarly. The same goes for. It's funny. I think this is one of the episodes that people probably remember the most is the adaptation of The Girl Who Cried Monster, which was number 8. I'm probably sounding like a pretentious dick as I keep doing that throughout the episode, but I can't help myself. The girl,
just like one of those idiot savants or something.
Yeah. What can I say? But in the episode, sorry.
Knew if it was prime number.
What's that?
What's the number?
For Girl Who Cried Monster?
No, I was just making a reference.
Oh.
With anything.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for ruining my groove. I appreciate that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, anytime, right? But no, it's funny because just as an aside, I think I read in the biography, it came from Ohio, that originally for The Girl Who Cried Monster, R.L. Stine was actually planning on the librarian, who is the monster in the story. He was actually planning for the librarian character to devour children as opposed to insects. And I think his editor was like, tone it down a little bit. I don't think readers would appreciate if you told them that, the big scary librarian monster was eating, fellow children. So he changed it to insects, which he, I guess, jokingly said in the book, I thought that was more disgusting than eating children. But
well, Honestly, I do too.
Yeah, it is because
I don't know.
Well,
Play
there's
the kid, play the spiders. I'd go with the kid.
probably exactly, but that's one of the images that probably sticks in my mind from the TV episode the most is when he actually, he in his monster persona, he has these big googly eyes on stalks. So he kind of basically looks like a slug almost. Not exactly like King Jelly Jam, but more like a slug. um,
King Jelly Jam, I think, is when I first started to think this series is kind of going off the rails.
Yeah. No, I remember that too, especially the weird observation. Oh, he smells like, what was it? Um, what was it? Really smelly vegetable.
Asparagus?
Not asparagus.
Broccoli?
Dang.
Brussels sprouts?
Brussels sprouts. Yeah. I just thought that was weird, especially where the story was going, because I think they mentioned that detail before they actually saw King Jelly Jam. Like, oh, why does it smell like Brussels sprouts? So here I am thinking, well, yeah, what can smell like Brussels sprouts? Well, apparently a giant slobby goo monster that serves as the god of this camp.
Yeah.
So there you go, kids. Have fun.
Slaves, children. What did they do? They just washed him all day or something?
Yeah, they just washed King Jelly Jam, who stank anyway. Yeah, that series went through some interesting travels for sure.
Right.
But yeah, King Jelly Jam is certainly special. Thank God they didn't make an episode out of that. But just to mention really quick about the Girl Who Cried monster again, the image I always remember is the sluggy librarian monster picking up an actual like living tarantula, and you see it, him raising it towards his mouth. I don't know, that just sticks in your mind for some reason. I was also kind of weirded out by the fact that Slappy turned into a ginger all of a sudden.
Yeah, he had brown hair in the books, man.
Yeah, what's up with that, R.L. Stine? First, you pull this Mr. Wood crap on us, and then when we get the chance to see him in the episode, he's got red hair. What's up with that?
I think Mr. Wood had red hair. Maybe that's what they were going off of.
Yeah, maybe. They're like, well, if we're going to switch the ending, might as well switch the hair color, because that makes sense, clearly.
Speaking of the Girl Who Cried monster,
yeah,
I wanted to ask you if there were what the most memorable twist endings were for you, because that was definitely a staple of the series.
Oh yeah, the good old twist ending. Well, the Girl Who Cried monster was a pretty good one. Just because
that's always the one that I think of first when I think of the successful twist endings.
Yeah, because it has a lot of implications that I think that go along with it. Because
should we know what the ending is?
What's that?
Should we spoil what the ending is?
Oh no, I was just going to say, for those of you who don't know, yeah, suck it up. Too bad. If you're listening to this, you're probably too old to read Goosebumps books anyway.
20 years to catch up on it.
Yeah, you had your chance. But no, the Girl Who Cried monster, as the title can so astutely inform you, is about a girl who cries monster. She spies in the book, this rather beefy librarian character who is creepy in general. She has to go back to the library after hours for some reason, and she spies this librarian basically shed his skin and reveals that he's a monster who likes devouring insects. And when she tries to tell anybody about it or get evidence that he is a monster, it backfires in some way. And this also happens in the episode.
Yeah, another staple of the series, a lot of malfunctioning cameras.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Never work for some reason. You can't, spot the ghost or the monster. Whatever is convenient, for the kids, it never works. The easiest solution never works.
Cell phones and iPads would have completely changed this whole series.
I know, right? Probably wouldn't be able to exist.
Yeah.
But in the end, the librarian is invited over to the girl's house for dinner, I guess. And lo and behold, it turns out that not only is the librarian a monster, as we all know, but the girl's parents are also monsters, and their main delicacy is other monsters. So not only are they cannibals, but they devour the librarian. And like I said, it carries the implication that the girl is, I guess, ostensibly a monster, unless there was some detail that she was adopted or something. So not only is she a monster, but I guess she has to be raised as a cannibal to eat her own kind. So yeah, like you said,
well, I think they were a different species of monster.
Okay, well, I guess that works. They only eat the sluggy looking ones.
Yeah. So that was one that took me by surprise.
No, yeah, that one certainly was a bit more shocking compared to some of the other ones. I'm trying to remember.
I think a lot of the other ones were just kind of, oh, it's over. Oh, no, it's not over.
Yeah. I will say, bringing up Phantom of the Auditorium again, I'm not sure if you remember, but that one had a pretty, I thought at the time anyway, a clever twist ending where, yada yada yada, curse play, they put it on anyway. The girl who's playing Esmeralda, the main character, is the main character in the story. And as the Phantom character comes on stage, who is supposed to be played by her best friend, she realizes that it's the actual Phantom, who is the actual Phantom, who tries to genuinely kidnap her, but she's able to evade him. And the thing of it is that the play became known as Curse because it was previously put on at the same school back in the 20s, but it was canceled because a boy went missing. And basically, at the end of the story, this girl and her friend find an old yearbook from the year that the play was put on, and when they look through it, they see that the boy who was playing the Phantom is one who was introduced to the story in the present time. Like, I think his name was Brian. It's a character that showed up, like as the new student in school. So I thought I didn't see it coming. I mean, I just thought, oh, the Phantom's the Phantom, whatever. So it was kind of creepy to find out that it was this kid who we thought was human this whole time. Turns out he's either immortal or some type of ghost. So I thought that one was pretty creepy myself.
And speaking of twist endings, do you remember The Ghost Next Door?
Yep, I do remember The Ghost Next Door. That one was pretty. I think I saw that one first as one of the TV episodes as opposed to the book. But that one was clever.
Presaging the Sixth Sense.
Yes, I think. No, it wasn't. I was going to say. I think that episode did inspire The Sixth Sense, but I remembered. I believe that was actually set of an episode from.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read that somewhere.
Yeah. So, I think I read that on Wikipedia. So take it for what it's worth, folks. But still interesting nonetheless. I thought it was a very
twist as the girl who cried monster though, which is he's the ghost. Oh no, wait, not ghost.
Yeah, exactly. Which, in a sense, too, kind of reckons back to I Live in Your Basement. Far less trippier, but still the same concept.
That's true.
I like too about the Ghost Next Door. That if I'm remembering right, she was being followed by this kind of spectral figure, and she couldn't figure out what it was, and only in the end, I think it might have I know it was in the episode for sure, I forget if it's in the book, but she's being followed by this spectral figure, and only at the end does she realize it's Death, or at least a Reaper. So that was kind of a dark, almost Twilight Zone-esque twist,
that's pretty heavy for a kid's book.
Exactly. It's like, holy crap, dead, like, death. So, no, for sure, that one was definitely one of the more, it was also kind of, I think with that one too, you mentioned earlier with Deep Trouble, you kind of felt it had a bit more of a sense of pathos than some of the other books. I think that kind of came through in The Ghost Next Door. Maybe I'm, attaching a little more significance to it than it really deserves, but, I feel like in the episode, at least, too, they kind of conveyed that sense that, this girl felt genuinely helpless, like, she was trying to figure out what was going on, and I think she even thought at some point that she was going to save this new kid next door who she thought was the ghost. And then when she realizes she's the one who's dead, it's like a genuinely sad thing. She's dead.
Yeah. And then I think she does wind up saving him from like a fire or something.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think that one had a bit more of a emotional pull to it as well.
So, we talked about books that made us genuinely empathetic for the characters, but were there any that made you feel genuine fright? I think is the next point we should address.
Well, yeah, it being a horror series, that would be a good point.
Maybe that should have been the first question.
Yeah, right? Did it actually scare us at any point in time? I want to say yes. There were at least some instances that I can be fairly certain of that I did get a chill or two. I'm trying to think of specifics here. The kind of like I touched on before, the whole aspect of Slappy trying to like take over bodies or collect souls. I forget which one it is. He basically had a Chucky thing going on where he was intent on possessing somebody or making somebody his bride. So that was always kind of disturbing to me.
Yeah.
Kind of unsettling.
His bride.
Yeah.
That gets into some weird territory.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I was just going to make a lewd joke about Mr. Wood, but, I'm sure that speaks for itself.
Complete that joke at home, listeners.
Yeah, you fill it in, and that's what she said. But trying to think of other instances, I'm certain that I don't. In all honesty, I'm trying to think. There wasn't too many in the actual books. I think I can safely say. I remember being kind of scared, actually, by some of the short stories. There was one in particular, I think it was from the first collection of Tales to Give You Goosebumps, called House of No Return, that I thought was pretty creepy. And they turned that into a fairly frightening episode, where the basic concept was there's this cursed house that's supposedly haunted, and this group of 3 friends, in order to initiate more people, I think they called it like the Daredevil Club, to initiate a new member, they'd have to spend a night in the house. And the ghosts that were said to haunt this house were of a married couple who died childless. And the reason they haunt there is because they're looking for a new child, and supposedly they take whoever is fool enough to stay in the house. So, this also had a good twist ending where the boy that they enlist, who is our main character, he is sent to the house and he's confronted by these spirits, and we don't even, I don't think we even witness what transpires between them, but at a certain point, these 3 jerks who make up the Daredevils clubs are like, what's taking them so long? So they go in, and then they are confronted by the spirits, and they are told that they're going to stay in the house forever and ever because the boy who was just there said, if you let me go, 3 more kids will come in my place. Which was totally messed up, but smart. But that was pretty eerie. It creeped me out a little bit, just the idea of these ghostly parents who wanted to adopt you for all time and just live in a house of the dead. That was pretty creepy for me. But yeah, I can't remember anything specifically from the books that I was like, whoa, scary. What about you?
Not really. I think because they were written to be for such young kids, I think the emphasis a lot of times was more on just maybe gross out stuff like Slappy throwing up on people.
Yeah, more so like creepy instead of scary.
Yeah, or like the concept of forever, like you just did with that house. That seemed to come up a lot because, we can't kill these kids because that might be a little too disturbing. So we'll just sort of threaten them with, "You're gonna do this forever."
Yeah, we'll just giving them a hell sentence is better than killing them, I guess.
Like in that Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns book.
Yeah, trick or treat forever and ever.
Yeah. More houses.
More houses. I remember that.
Yeah. But I will say that the only time that I've ever been scared enough by a book to actually put it down and get freaked out was an R.L. Stine book. It was a Fear Street book. I don't remember the title, but it was like a sort of a prologue book about the founding of Fear Street and how it came to be such a cursed place.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I remember those.
Yeah, and it was just this girl, or no, it was this guy. His daughter was burned as a witch, but he in fact was the one who practiced black magic, so he sought as revenge on the Puritans who burned her. And there was a scene where one of the daughters of the men who was killed sees a scarecrow, or no, it was her uncle actually, not her father. And as she gets closer and closer to it, she realizes, oh, that's not a scarecrow, that's my uncle. And his face is all blue and his tongue is like sticking out. Wow. And I was probably pre-teens when I read that, and it definitely freaked me out. And that was the only time. So you did it, R.L. Stine.
Congrats.
The only time I read a book. I've been scared that way by movies plenty, but books never managed to do that to me.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. See, if I knew we were including other R.L. Stine works, I might have mentioned some of the other stories he's done. Like I think in the Nightmare Hour and the Haunting Hour, those two and collections, there were some ones that kind of unsettled me pretty badly.
Oh God, that book didn't he do like a new series called The Nightmare Room? I think it was called.
Yeah, he actually did. Back early 2000, like 2000 to 2001, I think, the actual book series of The Nightmare Room spanned. And then around that same time, maybe like around 2005 or so, they did a WB show based on those books. And I remember, boy, this wasn't based on one of the books, but there was an episode, we're kind of tangenting, but I do need to mention this now that we brought it up.
It's all related.
It's all related. It's R.L. Stine. Of The Nightmare Room, the TV series, I believe it was the second episode, and I want to say, forget what the name of it was, something like, it wasn't Be Careful What You Wish For, but it had a very similar title, I believe, and it starred Shia LaBeouf, which I didn't know at the time, but he basically is going to high school or whatever, and he is basically in the process of growing up, and he has this old, well, no, I'm spoiling it when I say that. I'm going to spoil it anyway, but he's being followed by this little blonde-haired, freckled boy who's intent on being his best friend. And suffice it to say, Shia LaBeouf tries to get rid of him, and the kid comes back in increasingly more threatening tones. And I'm not sure what kind of despicable acts that this little blonde-haired angel commits, but at the end of the story, at the end of the episode, basically what happens is, I don't know how it happens, but I think the little blonde-haired boy ends up pushing Shia LaBeouf into a chest, and the boy climbs in after him, and when one of Shia LaBeouf's friends comes in looking for them, they open the chest, and Shia LaBeouf is there, and the little boy in doll form. And the blonde-haired doll was apparently one that Shia LaBeouf's character had, and was his best friend when he was younger. But now growing up, he wanted to get rid of the old thing. So I don't know. That story unsettled me a lot too, because again, the doll thing just creeped me out. But the idea of being in this state forever and ever. So
Again with the forever.
Again with the forever and ever. More houses, more houses.
I read the first book of The Nightmare Room, and it seemed to be a bit darker.
A little bit, yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's the short story thing. Maybe Stine is better creating, because he doesn't have to sort of have all this filler and stuff.
Yeah.
There was one about clowns, which was pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
This kid who's always afraid of clowns, and then he discovers there's this like evil clown society or something.
Yeah.
And he becomes a clown at the end, and there was a reference to him running over kids with his truck.
Yeah, there was something like that. I know which one you're talking about, but yeah, there was the Nightmare Room series of books, and then there was the Nightmare Hour, collection of stories. But yeah, in the Nightmare Hour, I believe is the story you're talking about. It's called Afraid of Clowns. Um, but yeah, those two books, The Nightmare Hour and The Haunting Hour, had some pretty good chillers in them. Yeah, there was the Afraid of Clowns one. I wish I had them with me so I could leaf through them right now. But yeah, there were some pretty disturbing ones. There was one too, and again, each one started off with a Halloween story, so that was cool. But the one from the Nightmare Hour started with one called Pumpkinhead, where basically just to get to the end of the story, um, these kids go to this creepy pumpkin patch, and this boy and his girlfriend are looking for the boy's little brother, who's mischievous and went back to the pumpkin patch to do something. And when they find him, his head is growing in the ground as a pumpkin. And the next thing you know, the vines are reaching up and bringing the two kids down. And the creepy old farmer, of course, that they saw in the beginning of the story, he walks over to like the kid brother's head and he squeezes his hair and he says something along the lines of, "It's not ripe yet, but it's getting there." How's that for terrifying?
I love it.
Well, yeah, so yeah, we touched on that there are certainly some, but few terrifying moments in the series. But take it as you will. One aspect that I kind of did want to touch on, however briefly, just to get your opinion on it, really, is that I've heard this in some circles, like the Blogger Beware blog, for instance, which kind of seems to basically propose this idea, so to speak, that Stine might have been a little out of touch with his audience and kind of insulting in general as a writer. And this is something that, people who go back to these books as adults will probably pick up on, that maybe the stories really aren't so great and are kind of boring and just totally not attractive to a young audience. What would you say in regards to that?
I don't know. I mean, it is funny that you brought up the Blogger Beware, because Troy Steele, who writes that, does bring up a lot of instances of like possible racism.
Yeah.
And fat jokes. That's one that I remember from the second Say Cheese and Die books, is that at one point he gets transformed into this morbidly obese child because that's how the picture comes out.
That's right.
There are so many jokes at the expense of fat people, and like his fingers are too fat to work the dials on the phone, and he can't count how many chins he has. So I wouldn't be surprised if I did go back and reread those books and I saw that there was maybe some less than savory attitudes about particular groups of people in there.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess that just comes with, revisiting some of your childhood favorites. I don't think I can really say anything too illuminating on that particular subject other than, yes, I kind of agree with you to the point that there probably are some things that would make me grimace a little bit just looking back at some of these stories and being like, oh my God, that is horribly insensitive.
Right. Well, it's from his background of being a jovial Bob Stine.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Anything for a laugh.
Yep, the joke master, him and his bunny ears.
Right.
But, well, just to kind of wind our conversation down a little bit, I did kind of just want, for kicks and giggles, to touch on what can only be called the glut of children.
That's a word you stole from me, by the way.
Well, nobody needed to know that, but thanks.
I said that off mic, everybody, and now he's stealing it.
Don't listen to him. He's unoriginal, and he's just along for the ride. He's hanging on to me, really.
Yeah, your coattails.
Yeah, ram it, clown.
Short coattails.
But we were going to talk about the miasma, the plethora. I'll use a different word. The plethora.
From Three Amigos.
You know what? I'm getting a little sick of your back talk here, mister.
I'm sorry.
That's right. But anyway.
My place is permanent co-host.
Exactly. Know your place as co-host.
Or I'll have to do it forever and ever.
More podcasts.
Yeah, all the knockoffs.
Yep, all the knockoffs, basically. The alternative horror series for kids that came out in the wake of Goosebumps' massive success.
Some of which were from Stine himself.
Yeah.
Ghosts of Fear Street.
Exactly, which, for all we know, might not have been directly from him, but...
yeah, well, it is from the entity known as...
from the pseudonym known as R.L. Stine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
I wouldn't be surprised if he actually died like 10 years ago.
Right? Yeah, he just exists in photographs and really cheaply made children's books. His legacy shall live on. But were there any particular series that you had experience with, like at all?
Yeah, I think the one that I probably read most faithfully was called Graveyard School.
Okay.
It was not an anthology format like Goosebumps. It was a continuing series.
Yeah.
But it was sort of anthology in the way that each book tended to focus on different characters of that school. So it was basically, I really don't remember any of the books themselves. But basically, it was your standard cast of characters of the skater kid and the kid who ate too much, who was named Jaws. Basically just the different scrapes they got into in their sort of creepy neighborhood. And then there was a guy who said, I don't know if he was like a principal's assistant or whatever, but his catchphrase was, "The principal is your pal," about the principal of the school. And I remember one of the covers of these books had a bowl of spaghetti with like eyeballs floating in it.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I think that was the one that I followed most sort of ardently, I guess.
Right, right.
And then there was another series which we've talked about before. You said it's called House of Horrors, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, House of Horrors. That's the one with the Night of the Gargoyle story that I think you were telling me about.
Yeah, and that one also was not an anthology. It was about this family, particularly the brother and sister living in a haunted house or whatever, and then the strange predicaments they get in. One of which was the boy started turning into a gargoyle for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then there was a joke about the oblivious parents, which were such a I don't want to say staple again, but I can't think of another word. A staple of these series, you always have to have these parents who just don't have a clue. And there's a scene where, because the boy's turning into stone, he has like more strength, and he grabs a bucket of dried concrete from his dad and cracks the concrete in half. And his dad goes, "Wow, those karate lessons are really paying off." That's like the only moment from any of that series that I remember.
That's the only one that sounds like it's worth remembering.
Right. And then I think one of the covers had like a disembodied hand crawling around.
Nice. You always gotta, I love the disembodied hand, that's for sure. I think if we are thinking about the same series, and if it's the one we're thinking about, I believe one of the titles from that series was called Knock Knock You're Dead. which I'm really, I have it, but and I probably read the back summary of it, but I can't tell you what type of story might ensue from a title like that. Maybe I'll find out one of these days. But
maybe it's best just to savor the mystery.
Yeah, kind of like I did when I was younger, just listening to those titles and thinking of, what could be. But
and the only other books that I can remember reading at that time that were vaguely related were the adaptations of Are You Afraid of the Dark? They had a series of books.
Oh, that's right.
That I don't think they were all necessarily based on the episodes. The one that I remember was about these kids who, they have this sort of misfit kid, and they think they're going to go into this house that's abandoned and scare him with their pranks. They'll tell him it's a haunted house, and then the house actually turns out to be haunted.
Whoa!
And winds up being, I know, right? And then he turns out to be the brave one who saves them all from danger. And then there's another one, which was actually an episode of the show, but it was expanded on pretty greatly in the book where the vampires move in next door.
Oh yeah, the nightly neighbors.
Yeah, that one. But then in the book, it goes into this whole thing you don't see in the episode about how everybody in the town gets turned into a vampire, and that the girl is the only human left, and how she's like surviving in like grocery stores and eating the food in there and trying to figure out how to defeat these guys. So it went into a lot more detail.
Holy crap! Turned into Salem's Lot.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I remember that one because I read it like on a train ride from Illinois to Texas. That took like 3 days or something.
Wow, that's too funny. That's crazy.
I think the coverage glowed in the dark.
That does sound familiar as well. I don't believe I ever had any of those, so I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah, I think those are the only ones that I followed with any sort of consistency. I'm sure there were more sort of hanging around.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Any different ones?
I kind of dabbled around in pretty much anything that looked similar to Goosebumps. That was kind of, around the time where I was, in a small sense, trying to break away and read things that were not Goosebumps, but at the same time find something similar. So, I was trying to, build up the whole literacy thing. But there was one series that I still do have a fair amount of volumes from, called Fright Time, and I don't see too many people talk about this series, and there really isn't too much information about it online. But it's funny, they seem to be in every library that I go to, so it makes me think that they had to be somewhat prevalent for me to see them around so much. But basically the idea behind that series, and it was kind of cool too, because the way the artwork looked from especially the first one, it seemed like it was an older series, like it was kind of getting into Nancy Drew Hardy Boys territory, just because it kind of had that old, I don't even know how to describe it, but it had an older looking artwork. It wasn't kind of cartoonish in the sense that Tim Jacobus did with Goosebumps. It kind of got towards that later on, but yeah, the early stuff looked, like maybe late 80s or so.
I'm sure what you're talking about when you say Nancy Drew.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping that would communicate the idea, and hopefully it does for whoever's listening. But that series, each book was actually 3 longer stories, all in one book. The cover art would usually depict the first story, I think is how that usually worked. And they had some great covers, like the one to the first one. I think the story's called The Madman on Main Street, and it shows this really gnarled crypt keeper looking guy staring out a window at this kid walking through his front yard. But those were kind of fun. I always got the sense, and with most of the other series that I picked up, that they were cheap knockoffs in a sense. Like there just wasn't something that flowed in them. And we talk about R.L. Stine maybe being kind of out of tune with the youth of the day. Those stories were like, who the hell are there? Are these children? Are they supposed to be children? Just, doing things, doing recreational things that they are. I don't know. But I followed that series pretty regularly. And like I said, I still do have quite a few of them. I tried to get into Christopher Pike's Spooksville.
Yeah, I read a few. Man, I've read probably half a dozen Christopher Pike novels.
Yeah.
I was preteens. I do not remember a single moment of any of them.
See, that's funny because I tried getting into it myself, but I never did for some reason.
I never read the Spooksville, but there was one called Monster, where it started out with the woman walking into a party with a shotgun and shooting 3 people in the head.
Jesus Christ!
I remember that. That's about all I remember of his stuff.
Yeah, I as far as the YA stuff goes, I only read a couple of R.L. Stine's Fear Street books. It's kind of funny because in the adult horror fiction world, it seems to be Stephen King and Dean Koontz. I feel like Christopher Pike was the Dean Koontz for kids because he was the other one that I think was probably most, especially for YA novels of the horror variety, he was probably the one most known for them. But
yeah, always in the shadow of Stine.
Yep. And it's funny because he probably, if you looked at it, probably had the better writing of the two. But
Oh,
that's,
definitely.
yeah, and of course that's the one we can't remember, right?
Yeah. Well.
But I just read a few of the Spooksville. Didn't really get into it. What other ones were there? I had a list of them. I will say I do want to address at least this one. There were two books written. I'm pretty sure there were only two that were written, and they were called Gooseflumps. FL Flumps. Gooseflumps.
I was thinking of those earlier today. Weren't they numbered weird? Like one was like 2.5 or something.
Yeah. But they were parodies. They were joke books.
And remember the author's name?
I don't remember the author's name.
Get ready for this, Gem.
Oh God.
Are You Slime?
Are You Slime? That's right.
Yep, I read those two.
Oh, man, isn't that a corker? But Are You Slime? The two books were Say Cheese and Barf.
That's right. I couldn't remember the titles.
And Stay Out of the Bathroom.
Yeah.
Stay Out of the Bathroom had the wonderful image of the kid's leg sticking out of a flushing toilet that was probably like glowing green or something like that. And Say Cheese and Barf it's definitely the grosser one, and it's probably the funnier one, at least on a totally sophomoric level, because the cover for that one is like a cow pasture, and all the cows in the field are barfing like heaps of this disgusting looking cheese, and like the one in the foreground that's like staring right at the reader has its hoof over its mouth, and you see like flies buzzing around the vomit piles. Oh, it's just so freaking tasteless. And the story isn't any better. Oh God, I forgot exactly how it goes about, but the main character has like lactose intolerance. And
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I don't even know what the main threat or conflict of the story is. All I know is that at the end, basically, I guess maybe there was some experimentation going on with the local cheese or something of that nature. Must have taken place in Wisconsin or something. But
I think it did.
Yeah, it's some experimentation with the cheese. Later, at some like cheese eating contest, the cheese has mutated into this giant blobby monster, and it's about to attack all the townspeople. So what the main character is forced to do, basically, is eat the cheese, and thus, from his lactose intolerance, barf onto the monster, so the acidity from his vomit melts it away. So as you can see, it's completely highbrow. More sophisticated than any of the actual Goosebumps books.
I can't remember you remember all these details.
I don't either.
I can't believe you can remember all these.
It's really sad in a sense that, I could probably read, Ulysses or Atlas Shrugged, and I probably wouldn't remember a goddamn thing from it. But I could tell you the plot to Say Cheese and Barf. So that's all. I think that's a good note to leave off on for the alternative series of Goosebumps, and probably.
One thing I wanted to mention was about the authors section said something about how he did his something about how he did his writing on bathroom walls or something like. If you weren't already convinced of how tasteless this
right. He wrote it on used toilet paper.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something classy, of course.
Absolutely.
It was like Captain Underpants taken to the most disgusting degree.
I missed out on Captain Underpants.
I got into it kind of late myself, but yeah, it was fun though. But that's the subject for a podcast that we'll probably never get to.
The Captain Underpants series?
Yeah, I think we'll have to skip out on that one for all of our anticipating horror listeners. They're really sad that we won't be touching on Captain Underpants.
I'll cross it off my to-read list.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. Didn't mean to keep your hopes up. Well, with the mention of Captain Underpants, I think it's an appropriate note to bring our wonderful, what do we got here? Hour and a half discussion of Goosebumps. Wow. Yeah, I know, right? Hour and a half.
Struggling to fill up an hour, to be honest.
I know, jeez, but apparently it remains in our hearts, or at least somewhere in the vicinity of our bodies, enough for us to bring it up in such lively discussion. So I guess with that, we can bring an end to this episode of the Sinister Spotlight. For those Goosebumps fans of you out there, I hope you've enjoyed this one. A little trip down nostalgia lane. Hope that we haven't crushed any of your dreams. But I'm sure we probably have, especially Eric.
Yep, my dreams are crushed.
Yep. Well, I was saying that you crush people's dreams, but hey, if your dreams are crushed, then I count that as a bonus, personally.
Yeah, it's always my goal.
Yeah, exactly. But, these are things that you learn as you go on. So, with that, I think we'll say yeah, totally fucked that up.
We're in the home stretch, man.
I know. I'm just trying to end it.
Pull it together.
Okay. All right. So with that, I think we can say have a wonderful night, and we hope that all you listeners bewared and that you were indeed scared.
That's a nice button on that episode.